Welcome, welcome, listeners. I am Sony the Connectaholic, and you are listening to the Threads and Truth podcast. The focus of this podcast is to stitch together cultural legacies. You will experience me connecting and expanding cultural and historical legacies for stronger communities. The verbally simulated sewing needle is the tool I use to connect the threads with the truth. The topic of this episode is threads that connect community. And my esteemed guest is the Honorable Patricia D. Scales, Cumberland County's Commonwealth attorney, of which she is the 10th Judicial District's first African American and first female Commonwealth attorney. She is also the daughter of prominent and adored educators in the county, the late Robert and Betty Scales. After this break, we will come back and begin to stitch the threads that connect community, the conversation that begins the eye of the needle. Thank you so much, Pat, for accepting the invite to be on Threads and Truth.
Good morning, Sony. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
I said earlier that, with the month of connecting, and I have been focusing on family, but I would be remiss if I did not include the family of community and connecting community. So this was really important. And when I speak of Cumberland, there are certain names that just automatically ring in my mind. And your name is definitely one of those that I could not have the conversation about connecting community in Cumberland without having you as a guest. So before we begin,
thank you.
Tell the listeners something interesting about yourself that most people do not know.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Sony. I appreciate the opportunity to participate in your program. I suppose one of the main things that people may not know is that I'm an avid sports fan, whether it's tennis, football, basketball, or baseball. I'm in my baseball season right now. The MLB had their first game of the year not a couple of weeks ago, and I'm following my favorite teams. The NBA is still going on, and I have a number one team with the NBA. So I suppose my interest and love of sports is probably the main thing that people may not know about me.
I am a Go Hard NBA fan as well. So we share that in common.
Thank you. Yes. I've in high school, I played basketball. And in fact, in my senior year, I had a 23-point average. And I have never forgotten that because that was a wonderful year. But also played softball. So our family has always been involved in sports and has a great love of sports activities.
Oh, well, that is interesting. I didn't know that you played basketball. Listen, the most I did in college, I was statistician for the boys basketball team.
I did not play basketball in college. I did not have those kind of skills. I played in high school.
In high school, right.
Yes.
So, for those listeners who may not know, I alluded to it in the opening about you growing up in Cumberland County, Virginia. Describe what it was like to grow up in Cumberland County in the Pine Grove community and include a few of your favorite memories.
Okay. As a child growing up in Cumberland was a segregated community. And the majority of the African American students that were able to go to school attended one-room or two-room schools scattered throughout the community. And in our area, it was called Pine Grove School. And my mom was a teacher. She taught me from first grade through the fourth grade. And then when they built Luther P. Jackson consolidated schools and all of the one and two room schools closed, then as fate would have it, she was also my grade teacher there at the Luther P. Jackson Consolidated School. So my early years were definitely a segregated experience here in Cumberland, but so much has changed, and Cumberland is a wonderful place.
I know, it had to feel maybe, I don't know about you, it was kind of an honor and also maybe strange at times. Attending school with your mother, I had that experience with my mother. It used to be fun for me, riding to school with her. But then there were times when it was like, uh-oh, I didn't do some homework. So I can't even imagine having your mother as your teacher. My mother was just the media specialist or librarian. So, but the teachers had quick access to hers, but sitting in their classroom with your mother had to be interesting.
Absolutely. It certainly motivated you to do your best or something that came close to it. It definitely did that. But even though my mom and my dad and my grandmother were educators, nobody was at home compelling you to study 24/7 or anything like that. You studied and worked hard. You did your homework. You did your best. But no one was at home browbeating you about what you needed to do and that type of thing. So to them, I give much credit for that because I know that it did not have to be that way. Growing up in Cumberland and attending Pine Grove School, we called it a one-room school, even though there are actually 2 rooms in the building, but only 1 room was actually used for the education of the children. Grades 1 through 7 were in 1 room. Some grades, may have been 1 child, 2 children, 4 or 5. But the teacher, in my case, my mom, taught all the kids in the same room, and sometimes the older kids would help the younger kids, or kids would learn to work independently while the teacher was working with the older kids. And it was not unusual for children in lower grades to have their ears focused on what the older kids were learning. So you had the opportunity to learn what the older kids were learning, as well as to focus on what you were doing yourself. So it was a great opportunity. When I look back on it, attending Pine Grove was such a tremendous foundation because at that time, children had to be more independent, able to study on their own, learn on their own, go get water on their own. The building had no running water. It had no indoor plumbing. So everything was very rough and rural, and that even though we had running water and indoor plumbing in our house, when we went to school, it meant nothing to us just to shift the gear and to go with the flow there at the school. So we learned a lot. I learned a lot from that experience and the ability to get along with other people and to function as a school community or a school unit.
And as an educator myself, we used to talk about having peer mentors and study buddies with our students. You all were doing that long before it was a buzzword.
Certainly sounds like it, yes.
Yes. And then having to go get your own water. And, when we did the reenactment last May for the Virginia Most Endangered Historical Places, and just watching you all reenact, you standing in the door, reenacting your mother and your grandmother's spirit, welcoming the students, and then the students taking the pails to go get the water. That was all a part of the school day. And, where education has shifted so much now to focus on other things, that was a part of developing the whole child before that was a concept. The education.
I absolutely. Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that. It was about development of the whole child. The teacher had so much control over our lives as students. The teacher could be your faith leader. Your teacher could be the school nurse. The teacher had to be almost everything to the child. We learned responsibility, absolutely, from the standpoint of We had a large coal-fired stove in the middle of the room, and you learn pretty quickly to respect that hot object in the middle of the room. It's just things that you learned that children today may not be fully aware of. I guess they would consider it roughing it or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. And they would go and we would get the water. Usually the boys would go and get the water from the spring, which was a good distance away. And they'd bring the buckets back, and we had one dipper, maybe two metal dippers. I'll never forget those. And everybody used the same dipper. And it was just something that we did that nobody gave any thought to. There was no telephone. There was no TV. I remember perhaps my mom brought a small TV to the school, maybe when I was in the fourth grade, perhaps, or if there was a special event coming up, she brought her small TV to the school. But there were a lot of good memories there. You know, we had the May Day festivals where we would wrap the maypole and the community would come out and watch us. And there were various events at the school, such as the Queen's Rally, which was always a wonderful event. Recess was great. We would play baseball and do cartwheels and just so many things there behind the school. And you've been to the school and you're very familiar with that property. So there's a lot of fond memories that I have of attending Pine Grove. And as a child, sometimes you don't really appreciate things until you can look back on them and reflect on those days. So as a maturing adult, I certainly do have a great appreciation for my years at Pine Grove School.
Right. Oh, what memories. And you're right. Every time I attend Pine Grove or go visit Pine Grove, I did listen at me like I attended the school. But sometimes, when you connect with your ancestral spirits, sometimes you do feel like you did attend. So I can feel you all spirits in that school and in the back of the school. And I can envision you all just having pure, getting your learning first, because that was the most important, but just having pure childhood fun and making your fun, which is what, even in my generation, what we say, the current generation, they don't know how to make their own fun these days. Everything is just
exactly
for them, the video games and technology is great. Don't get me wrong. It is great because, hey, that's how we're having this conversation right now for our podcast. But right. They need to understand and learn how to make their own fun. And that is about to be a lost skill in our children that we need to bring back. So our next question, when you think about building community, were there any leaders that emerged, or was it the "it takes a village" mantra that was heavily relied upon in the Pine Grove community?
I think that in the Pine Grove community it was a village concept, and of course the teachers at the school and the leaders in the churches that most of the people in that community attended, Rising Zion, Bethlehem, Mount Calvary, and perhaps in some instances New Hope churches. Those were probably the centers or the driving forces in the community. There were so many people who stand out in my memory that I really don't want to start naming individuals, but as with all groups, some people will stand out no matter what the circumstances and no matter what the situation may be. And there are many of those, male and females, who were involved in so many of our activities, whether it was the 4-H, whether it was having fundraisers for the school, whether it was being involved in church activities, whatever it may be. There were those that you could always know would be present and who would be involved in trying to make things better. And I pay much respect to them and give homage to them.
We stand on their shoulders. we truly stand on their shoulders. And even though at the time they may not have considered themselves as, community leaders, they were just doing what they knew that they were supposed to do.
Right. They were very, very focused on making our lives better, enriching our lives, and just doing what they felt was necessary in order to make it better for the community. And that's part of the reason that I so appreciate what you and your mom are doing in the group, from the standpoint of trying to renew or regenerate the sense of community for the Pine Grove area. It's so badly needed because there are a lot of memories, there's a lot of ancestral history and all of that in preserving the Pine Grove community. So I do applaud you and your mom and the group for what you are doing.
Well, thank you so much for that. It is hard work. But we're all dedicated to doing the work of AMMD Pine Grove Project, because there are stories to be told, lots of stories to be told within that community, about that community, for that community, so that others will have a newfound respect for not just Cumberland County, but specifically the Pine Grove community, where you and my mother and, all of your family members, grew up. Even if they did leave to migrate north, they never forgot home.
That's exactly true. And there was a major migration of families from Cumberland to northern places where for jobs and whatever other reasons there were, probably and largely for jobs. Sometimes as I'm doing historical research in the community, there are so many families that used to be in the Pine Grove area that predated my time on this earth, and everybody moved away, and it's just amazing, absolutely incredible how many families used to be in that area.
You are 10,000% correct. My grandparents were ones that migrated north to New Jersey. A lot of their siblings migrated to Philadelphia or New Jersey or Long Island. Or, my grandfather had one sister that went to Worcester, Massachusetts. And she left home at age 14 or 15. So they migrated north for better opportunities, but they, again, never forgot home, whether it was sending money back or whether it was coming back to visit. Even if they were away, we were just having a conversation yesterday, and she said, it's just amazing how people never forgot home. And even though they were away, they came back, even if it was for a week. I'm going home to visit for a week, and they would go hunting, or they would come during revival time, just to make their presence known, to say, here I am, family. I have not forgotten you, nor have I forgotten home.
And as a child growing up, and for even into adulthood, homecoming in August was a major event in the local churches, whether it was Rising Zion on fourth Sunday, Bethlehem on second Sunday, Mount Calvary on first Sunday, or New Hope on third Sunday. It was a major time when homecoming took place, and of course followed by a revival. At homecoming, many people came back home from up north, and it was an opportunity for people to renew acquaintances, to talk about life's blessings and life's struggles. So it was an exciting time when homecoming came every August. You got to see cousins you hadn't seen and since the previous year, and aunts and uncles, and it was just wonderful. And for example, my mother's mother, she was one of 12 children. And of those children, she and her brother, Lee Booker, were the only ones who remained in Virginia. Everybody else went north. But the ones that were still living when I was a child, they came home. They came home in August and other times of the year. So homecoming was an important time. That's absolutely the truth.
Last summer, I found one of my Pop-Pop's sermon books, and it was such
Hmm.
a treasure to read that. And in one of his sermons, although he had left and gone to New Jersey, for better opportunity, in one of his sermons, he said that as he was driving across the George Washington Bridge one day, he realized that he missed home, and he wanted to bring his family back to Virginia because he missed home. He missed that connection with the land, and he just wanted to go back. So he worked and worked and worked and did what he had to do so that he could move my mother and her siblings back to Virginia again.
That's amazing. I did not know that Reverend Adolph and Miss Virginia, his wife, had lived in New Jersey. As a child, they were here. I never knew that they had lived somewhere else. That's a
Yes,
great story.
yes, they were all born in Montclair, New Jersey. Hey, well, you did a great segue into what my next conversation was going to be about the pillars of church and faith and education and your family's direct connection to those pillars. And you touched really well on the connection with your mother in education. Do you have any connection to the faith or church connection in your family?
In our community, as a child, churches met one Sunday a month. Rise in Zion, which is the church closer to my family, met on the fourth Sunday. Bethlehem, which is my church, we met on the second Sunday. Mount Calvary in the Cartersville area met on the first Sunday, and New Hope was a third Sunday church. So people visited other people's churches all the time. And as a child, I recall that some people came to our church regularly on the second Sunday, and I was surprised to find out as I grew older that they were not members of our church. They actually went to other churches on different Sundays. So it was just amazing, and people had the opportunity to visit with each other, to catch up on the latest news and information. So it was a great time. But as time passes by, things change, people change, and the churches began having more services each month. So I think that the religious community was a significant component of the Pine Grove community. The Pine Grove, and I guess I'll say the greater Pine Grove community. It was a opportunity for of course, spiritual learning, as well as an opportunity for meeting and greeting.
Right. Fellowship was so important. Faith and
Yes.
fellowship were so important within the Black culture and community, which spanned from generations prior. That faith and fellowship, because there was a time when we, as a culture, could not fellowship. So when you got to church, and like you said, you didn't know whether they were, you were surprised to find out that they were not members. They just wanted to be in the house. So they were, now today, people will call that church hopping. But back then,
Mm-hmm.
it would be considered, I'm just trying to be in the house.
That's right. That's right. And they wanted to support their neighbor's church. They may attend different churches, but they wanted to support what was going on in that church. And for example, when I was growing up at Bethlehem Baptist Church, Reverend Sam Miller, who is your great uncle,
Yes.
he was our pastor for many years, and he was a powerful speaker and a tremendous singer, and people loved coming to Bethlehem. So I remember him so well. And from the standpoint of your grandfather, Reverend Adolph Miller, I often heard him at Mount Calvary Baptist Church. So it was, all of this is a sense of community. All of this is a wonderful opportunity to reflect on life in the Pine Grove community years ago.
Well, Pat, we're going to take a brief break. We will come back and travel down the shaft of the connecting community story needle. Again, we have Patricia D. Scales as our guest today. We'll be right back. Welcome back, listeners. Again, we have Patricia D. Scales with us, a Cumberland native and Cumberland resident. We are talking about connecting community today. And Pat, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that out of 12, your grandmother and her brother, Mr. Lee Booker, were the only ones who remained in Cumberland. Even as young adults, and we're finishing our collegiate careers, many students have stood at that fork in the road, staring left and staring right, trying to make decision post graduation. Where do I go? Do I return home to pursue opportunity elsewhere and make that home? Or do I just go back? If you could tell me your fork in the road moment once you had finished school. I see that you attended James Madison University. I think it was called Madison College, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Then you matriculated to William and Mary Law School. So once you finished William and Mary and you were like, well, what do I do now? Describe that decision-making process and then eventually why you decided to return home.
The process of returning to Cumberland didn't occur until about 3 to 4 years after I had graduated from William and Mary, or the Marshall Witt School of Law at William and Mary. And initially, I had not planned to return to the rural life. I was content in the urban and suburban world and had planned to practice law there. But things don't always turn out the way we plan them, and I'm not the kind of person who fixates on planning and getting upset when things don't turn out the way I planned them. Mm-hmm. I think things turn out the way that they are supposed to be. And so after attending law school, I was a clerk for the Court of Special Appeals, which is one of the appellate courts in the state of Maryland. And I did that for a year. And then I returned to Richmond, where I practiced with the law office of Hill, Tucker, and Marsh, which was a great and wonderful place to learn to be a lawyer, to learn to be an advocate for people. My office was next door to Mr. Oliver Hill. My office was down a couple of doors down from Senator Henry Marsh, and all of us worked together on projects. And while people hear a lot about Senator Marsh because he was such a major individual in civil rights and in the leadership structure of the city of Richmond, his brother, Harold Marsh, who was one of the partners there, was another tremendous person. Mr. Harold Marsh was about faith, family, and the firm. That was Harold Marsh, and he was also another great and wonderful person. So Hill, Tucker, and Marsh was where I stayed for about 3 years until the position of Commonwealth attorney in Cumberland County came open. And I gave it some thought, and actually I was encouraged to pursue this career by another attorney, a partner there at Hill, Tucker, and Marsh. His name is Clarence Dunaville. And he is also a tremendous lawyer and litigator and a great person. But anyway, in 1995, I decided I wanted to run for Commonwealth attorney here in Cumberland, and God's plan would have it. I won that election in 1995, and I've been Commonwealth attorney since then. The job has changed tremendously in that period of time. When I first started in 1995, Cumberland was a smaller and slower place. The position of Commonwealth attorney was considered to be part-time, which meant that I could also have a law practice, which I did. I did both until 2013 when the state of Virginia made my job as Commonwealth attorney full-time. And the only difference between what I did before and what I did after 2013 was that I no longer had the law practice. I closed the law practice so I could focus my full effort and time on serving the people of Cumberland. So I've been the full-time Commonwealth attorney since 2013. So as of this coming June, I will be in my 26th year as Commonwealth attorney here in Cumberland.
That is an amazing story. Wow, the training ground that you had was so rich. That was just, I mean, you were among some of the best in the city. And and I just got chills when you said, "Oh, my office was right next door to Mr. Oliver Hill," and I was like, "Oh, wow."
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
wow.
It was
My
a wonderful opportunity. I wouldn't change that or exchange that for anything in the world. And I'm just thankful that that's how it turned out, that I was able to work there for those years.
Right. That is truly a blessing. And like I said, what rich training ground you had. And you are able to now carry that into your 26 years as Cumberland County's Commonwealth's attorney. So Cumberland is truly, truly blessed to have you there. Like you said, things have changed in Cumberland from your early years to now, and you've seen a lot of the changes that have taken place. What would you consider the biggest struggle right now, trying to reconnect that true sense of community in the Pine Grove area?
And the community has changed tremendously. As I look back over the years, I am aware that of the people who used to attend that school, who used to be in that community, that I'm probably one of the youngest ones of those who ever attended that school, who have personal knowledge of what it was like to attend Pine Grove. As a child growing up, I don't think there was a house on that road that I did not know who lived there. It
Okay.
was Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, cousin so-and-so, uncle so-and-so, and the entire road from one end to the other, you knew who lived there. You knew whose house it was. But along with the changes that come with time and population growth, there are many new houses, many new people. So I think that in light of the fact that the community has changed, I think that creating a community center or focus has to change at the same time. And I think that Pine Grove could be the catalyst for that type of change, to create a center or a place where people can gather, where from one end all the way to Deep Run Road, all the way to Route 60, Anderson Highway, that perhaps with Pine Grove, the school itself, the building itself, and the evolution that it's going through, and how it's changing, and we don't know what its ultimate future will be, that perhaps that could be the center of the community again, to introduce people who have moved here to people who have been here, to just create a greater sense of community so people once again know their neighbors and feel and are able to gather together. I just think that would be tremendous.
Oh, Pat, you are about to make me just well up, and I can't have a cracky voice during this podcast, but you spoke about that ever important corridor of Pine Grove Road that connects from Deep Run Road to Route 60. And like you said, you knew everyone from end to end. And that indeed is one of our organization's goals. AMMD Pine Grove Project's goal is to make Pine Grove School a community hub once again. The
Mm-hmm.
visions that we have for the building and around the building are just, massive and expansive. And, I'm always a dreamer, and I dream in color, and my mother is a dreamer and she dreams in color, so um,
Mm-hmm.
we have these dreams. And what you have said here as Pine Grove School being the center and the hub and the catalyst, it's like you've been on the telephone with my mother and I during our conversations, but
Oh my goodness.
you share the vision. I say all of that to say that you share our vision, and in time it will happen. It will happen that will become a community hub, so that people who are, like you said, the community is changing, who are new to the community can learn more about the impact that 5 mile radius of a community called Pine Grove had within Cumberland County, Virginia.
Right, right. I agree.
What resources do you see that are still there that may be dormant but could be used to revitalize the community? Well, we kind of said Pine Grove School, but are there any other resources within that Pine Grove community that you say, well, you know what, this could happen?
From the standpoint of resources, I think I would have to say that the people, the community would be the primary resource for that area, and perhaps individuals stepping forward to say that they want to help renew the ties that were binding in that community initially, and other individuals coming forward to say they want to be a part of that renewal of binds so that the community itself can grow and come together and become more cohesive. I think it's a question of what the people will do. From the standpoint of resources, I think that Pine Grove itself, as the building, as I indicated before, as it is evolving into what it will ultimately be, I think that's the primary resource for that area, and the people. That's how I see that particular situation.
Yes, yes, spot on. Yes. The people, human resources are
Yes.
essential and critical to revitalizing the Pine Grove community. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Are you, speaking of people, are you still in contact with any of the residents that influenced you?
As with time, many of the people who influenced me in the Pine Grove community have passed on.
Right.
Time is never ending. It just keeps marching on, and it's precious.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say the one thing that people have to understand, that time is precious. And because once our ancestors, our role models, our mentors, once they're gone, and the elders in the family, once they're gone, a lot of times if we don't take the time to talk to them, their stories go to the grave with them. So
Absolutely.
to be able to expand upon and help build these stories, it is very important to have conversations with our elders and mentors, and not just to let them know, hey, I appreciate you. You didn't have to, you didn't know what impact you had on my life.
I would say that it would be their sense of pride in self, their sense of focus on the need and need for education and the value of a good education. I think that many of them were committed to the concept of do no harm. They were focused more on helping and building up rather than being negative or judgmental or complaining about what they didn't have. They focused more on trying to utilize what they did have and making the best out of the circumstances that they may have had. Parents then were very focused on their children's education. You know, if my mom or my dad asked the family to let their child participate in this program or to go here and speak at this event, they were proud and they were very thankful that their child had the opportunity to do that. And they were supportive of the teachers and the schools. And it was just beautiful because the community itself was focused on trying to be better and to know more.
And there we're back to that pillar of education and why they honed in on it. So, because in many instances, many of the children were one generation removed from, enslaved ancestors, or one generation removed from people who did not have the opportunity to attend school. So,
yeah,
that pillar was most important. And like you said, they were builders of faith, builders of pride, builders of community. And there was just, it's that all of that is just irreplaceable.
it is. It is.
Well, Pat, when we return, we've traveled down that long shaft and we're going to get to the point of the needle. Listeners, stay tuned. We'll be back after this brief break. Welcome back, listeners. Today's guest, I have Patricia D. Scales with me, and we have put our thread through the eye. We have traveled down the shaft, and now we're about to wrap up to the point. And the point personifies the piercing of the truth. And Pat has given so much insight on connecting community within Cumberland County, Virginia. So, Pat, after our conversation and having pulled and stitched all of these threads together, what garment of truth do you think that we've created during this conversation?
I would like to believe that the garment of truth we have committed is one that has various threads, that is composed of various threads. Those threads would be ones of strength, determination, grit, perseverance, but also possessing threads of love, community, being better, and doing better. And I think that's what the Pine Grove community epitomizes. That is the fabric that was stitched by those of us in the Pine Grove community and the people who came ahead of us, who gave us that opportunity just to be there at that wonderful school. The community really was unified in many of the activities that they engaged in. I think I indicated that they were committed to doing better and being better, and they wanted their children to accomplish and do the same things, even if some did not have, did not have those same opportunities. So I think that we have, that the community, I shouldn't say we, but that the Pine Grove community stitched a strong fabric that has so far survived the test of time.
Oh, that is beautiful. What a beautiful analogy. I when you were speaking, I could see like cross stitch or embroidery,
Right.
Something, where
Mm-hmm.
you could create a beautiful picture or something to place on a piece of clothing. But, cross stitching came directly to mind as you were speaking about those multiple threads. I absolutely love that analogy. This new garment, how could you use that to connect young people to pursue law careers, which is what was once a historically dominated male field?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that the legal profession is truly one that I have enjoyed. I'm glad I made that choice, and I'm glad I made that decision. And it's just, I'm thankful that it worked out for me. I feel that being a prosecutor is an opportunity to do justice. If you are a fair minded, compassionate person who doesn't forget where you've come from, it's an opportunity to achieve a great deal of fairness and hopefully justice. I think that young people are distanced from us as the adults in the community at this point in time, unless they live in the household with you. But from the standpoint of community, with the pandemic currently in place, I think that it's really hard to reach out to young people to share with them more information about how they can soar and fly as young people and growing into adults, about how if they just stay the course, about how if they just make the right choices, and how if they just believe that some kind of way things will work out and doors will open. And it's hard to share that message currently with the pandemic. I certainly hope that programs such as yours, your podcast, will reach individuals. But it goes back to parents in the home, mm-hmm. educators in the school, counselors in the school, being able to share this information to encourage and to motivate the practice of law, whether one chooses to prosecute, to be a defense attorney, to be in private law practice, or to work for the government, to pursue other endeavors where law degrees are required. It's a tremendous opportunity, and it certainly altered the way that I examined the world and viewed the world. It's amazing. So I encourage anyone who has any inkling or notion of wanting to be a lawyer for whatever the reason to pursue that. And I think that they will find it to be a rewarding career. But again, because of COVID, there are limited opportunities to meet with young people and talk with young people. Prior to the pandemic, I would give occasional speeches at the school, in particular to the high school. Sometimes I would meet with the elementary kids just to talk to them about the practice of law and to talk to them about being Commonwealth attorney and the type of job that it is. So you do what you can when you can. But for right now, it's very difficult to spread a message unless it's on avenues such as your podcast or other programs.
Absolutely. And there we have to reach them through their means, and which is technology. So,
yes.
Yes. And I hope that young people are listening to this and will be encouraged about, yes, I can. Look at Patricia D Scales. Yes, she did. And I can do the same. Little known fact, I was going to be a lawyer as well. That was one of my career goals, to pursue law.
Oh my.
A law degree, yes. And then the education bug jumped on me, and I had thought about it again, and I was like, oh, it's too late to go to law school now. But
it's never too late. I had pursued a career in journalism before I decided to go to law school, so it's never too late, Sonia. If that's right. What you really want to do, if that's your passion, then it's never too late.
Right. I started out in college as a criminal justice major, as a juvenile justice major. And my turning point was, wait, I want to help students and young people before I see them in the courts building. And, I wasn't too far removed in age from a lot of the children that were coming before me. And I was like, okay, this has got to stop. This has got to stop. How can I reach these children before they get into the system? And that's when I said, you know what? I think education is the answer. Maybe if I can become a counselor, I can get to them and speak with them and drop knowledge and gems in them before I see them in this setting. So that was the turning point for me.
Absolutely. And that's wonderful because that is so important when the teachers and when the educators and the administrators are involved in the children's lives, trying to keep them on the right path so they do not end up in the court system.
Right.
But when they do end up in the court system, then I consider it my turn
Right.
to do what I can do to get them on the right path and to help them be what they can be.
As we get closer to the end, what is one takeaway that you would want the listeners to absorb?
I would say that it doesn't matter where you begin your journey. It's a question of the steps that you take as you walk through your journey that help to determine where your journey will take you. That it's still within your control to at least take those steps and to try to accomplish all that you can. I'm the Commonwealth's attorney now, but I never forget that I started my education in what I consider a one-room school where I attended for 4 years. And some people might think that would close the door on future opportunities and endeavors, but I saw it or see it as a trampoline or a springboard that helped propel me to pursue other activities. So it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you end your journey. And I hope that this message touches at least one person to inspire them, to motivate them, to help them know that they can make it and that they can do it.
That is a wonderful summation. And as you stated, I share with you that I hope that this touches at least one person. And I hope that it's a young African American woman who is listening to say, you know what, I've always thought about this, but I need a little direction, or maybe I don't know, how to start, or, that may not have someone in the home to help guide them through
Mm-hmm.
career paths or whatever. So how could that one listener contact you via email to say, hey, Miss Scales, I have a question, and I know that you would be glad, I know that you're extremely busy, but I know that you would always fit in time to answer the question of that one person who we are hoping to reach in this podcast.
That would be a tremendous result of this podcast if someone would call or send me an email. I guess I'm old school in that regard, that I would prefer a phone call. I
Yes.
think that I think the telephone calls and talking to people and hearing their voices and they hearing yours, and that is more productive, and it's just what I prefer. I can certainly give you my office number, and they can feel free to call. It's 804-492-4018. That's my office number, and they can call and just leave a message, and I will call them back.
Oh, that is amazing. You, again, like me, I just think that phone calls provide such a personal touch.
Absolutely.
Some things could be lost in translation via text or email. Is it convenient? Yes, it absolutely is convenient. But the more personal conversations come through an actual phone call. So thank you for providing us with that number. I just cannot thank you enough for accepting the invite to share the story about connecting community and your story. And it's just so inspiring. Like you said, it doesn't matter where you started, it matters in where you're in or where you're placed. And another thing that you said was that, sometimes you don't fight the decisions that are put before you, because oftentimes those decisions are destined and it's not your doing.
Right.
Not your doing. So you just got to
Right.
go with the flow.
I really appreciate this opportunity today. It's been wonderful. I've enjoyed reflecting on the past days as well as the impact of the past on the future. So thank you so much.
There you have it, listeners. The eye, the shaft, the point, all served its individual purposes in manipulating the threads. And together, the needle and thread hold this wonderful story garment together. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Threads and Truth. Tune in next week as I stitch together more threads. For information, if you have questions, or if you would like to be featured on Threads and Truth podcast, send me an email at threadsandtruth@gmail.com. Follow the show on Instagram at Threads and Truth, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, Threads and Truth. You bring the threads, I have the needle, and together we will connect the garment of truth. Until next time, this is Sony the Connectaholic. For information, if you have questions or if you'd like to be featured on Threads and Truth, send me a note at threadsandtruth@gmail.com. Follow the show on Instagram at Threads and Truth, and be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel Threads and Truth. You bring the threads, I have the needle, and together we will connect the garment of truth. Until next time, this is Sony the Connectaholic.